All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is advanced play. Now, as is tradition with the traditional game of rock paper scissors hand game, everybody knows, each player knows exactly what their opponent can play, and that's what makes the game fun. That's what gives the game this whole game theory thing, wherein you're trying to guess what your opponent is playing, and then you want to react accordingly. So we want to keep that, of course, and that's done by having what are called proxies in the game. So the proxies are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards that you have in each of your decks. Now, why is that called a proxy? Because it essentially replaces poise in your hand. So in the game, you have a maximum hand of 8 cards, so that includes your jacks, your 3 jacks, and you can have a maximum 5 number of poise in your hand. All right. So those proxies replace the poise, and the poise, as you draw them, are put face up in the board, and that's essentially how you know exactly what your opponent can play. So you have your 5 poise right in front of you, your opponent has their 5 poise right in front of them, and of course you know each other's life and permission, and that's essentially how you can try anyway to predict and try to anticipate what your opponent's going to do, because you know exactly how much your opponent's cards cost, so you can basically block them from gaining those permission, or you can play the appropriate jacks against their poise in case you know that they can play those poise. Now, there's also one more additional wrinkle you can add to it. For the cards that you can actually play, and this is purely a system, right? You can actually promote those cards, right? So at the start of the turn, for example, I have these poise that cost 0. So the opponent must know that I can play them. So in order to make it easier for your opponent, for each player to know what each other can play, then we promote cards. So promoting is just essentially putting them up. That's all there is to it. There's no real, amount of length or distance that you need to put your cards up from or whatever. But essentially, cards that are closer to your opponent means that you can play them. You're essentially declaring and helping your opponent to read what you can do. So this is all just manners, right, in the game. It's not required, but it's so much easier to play this way. And of course, if you lose permission, for example, or what have you, then you demote your card by putting it down. But since these cards cost nothing, then they can always be played, right? So let's pretend this is the start of a game. So I have 3, for some reason, 3 cards that cost none. My opponent has all poise that cost something, so you can't promote anything, so they're essentially all demoted. But for example, after a few turns, he's gained some permission, what have you, so you can promote those cards, right? Neat, right? So now that essentially is how we can read everything that our opponent can play. So we know that they can always play their jacks, hence, we don't need to have jacks on the table. But we need to have all the poise on the table, because those are the things that he needs to be able to read properly, or each player needs to be able to read properly. Now, what happens if we want to play a poi, right? Since we don't have them in our hands. So that's where the proxies come in. So the proxies represent cards from left to right. So the first card from your left represents your 1 proxy. The next card is a 2. Next card 3, and so on and so forth. Right. Of course, you can only play as many proxies as you have cards or poise on the table. So for example, if you don't have a 5th card, then you can only play 1 to 4. Right? Okay, makes sense. Okay, so let's do a sample turn. Okay, so let's say that is both hands of each player after drawing a card. So let's say as a first turn I want my permission, right? So I want to play everything nice. So what I want to do is put my 1 proxy down, and he does the same, puts down a proxy. Let's say, actually he cannot, because it is the start of the game. So he doesn't have any permission. So let's say he just plays a random jack, right? So we reveal our cards. So I said I played my first card from the left, which is everything nice. Essentially it, and he gains his red permission, and then we both gain all permission, so green, blue, and red, which is the effect of the everything nice. So as you can see, even though I had a card advantage at the start, he actually pulled ahead because he's gaining an additional red permission. So everything nice is cool, but it's situational as well because remember, you're helping your opponent play as well. Okay, so another example, just to make it absolutely clear how proxies and advanced play works. Okay, so for example, I wanted to gain life for some reason, right? At the start of the game, I wanted to gain life. Let's just say. So I'll play my 4. I want to play this card, right? So that is the 4th card from the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. And let's say my opponent was particularly good at predicting what my move would be. So he predicts that I would use this card, so he wants to play the scissors, right? So we reveal. Play the scissors. Right there. Okay? So my potion of youth goes there, just to make it absolutely clear. And then we resolve the cards. He gains his red permission, and then he actually even gains control of this card because of the purple trigger pointing up, which means he gets to resolve that card. So he can even gain 3 life if he wanted to. If he wanted to pay any color permission, let's say he had some permission, then he can use that card to his benefit. So there you go. That's essentially how advanced play is. It's very non-traditional. I mean, no other game has done this, but it is essentially very important in Jak and Poi that everybody knows what the other opponent, the other players can play, because otherwise it wouldn't be rock, paper, scissors now, would it?